Hello and welcome to another moon sign video in the moon sign series. Today I'm gonna do moon in Pisces. Now, this moon sign is actually a really interesting moon sign to me because even though it's a water sign, it's pretty easy to go in depth with Pisces moon, but we also have to remember that Pisces moon is mutable water. And so if you think about it, water, we go into a little bit of depth about what water is. Water is very a reactive element. It's a liquid. It takes the form of its surroundings and whatever it's placed in. You put it in a glass, it'll take the shape of a glass. You put it in a plastic tub, it'll take the shape of the plastic tub. This is kind of how water sign placements in general tend to react to their environment because they're very emotional, and so but they're also very receptive to emotional energy. So when people give off emotional energy and direct it at them, they can be prone to reflecting that back because water is very reflective, it's very reactive, and because it takes the shape of its environment, that's how they kind of navigate throughout the outside world and everything. Pisces, however, is interesting because Pisces is mutable water. This makes Pisces one of the most adaptable water signs in astrology, and in my opinion, the most adaptable sign out of all of the signs in astrology, both for good and bad reasons. Cancer is cardinal water, so obviously Cancer is going to react to the environment, but it's very, very direct, very far front, all of that. Scorpio is fixed water, so it's almost like ice. It's icy cold. It's very restricted and controlled, and all of that. But with Pisces, we are dealing with mutable water. And so with Pisces, because it's mutable water, imagine the kind of emotions reflecting that sort of mutability in the water sort of concept. With Pisces moons, their emotions aren't necessarily very, very clear to them. Most of the time, Pisces moons tend to go through these very crazy emotional waves where they kind of just get swept up and absorbed in them, and they kind of just roll with them, and they may not necessarily have any sort of conscious awareness that they're going through these moons. They might feel them inside, but they're not necessarily going to be consciously aware enough to deal with them. This is the kind of sign that could this is the kind of moon sign that I could actually see going through perhaps if they're depressed, they could be going through an emotional wave of depression, but they're not necessarily aware of that, so they could be trying to interact with society and people everything is completely normal and whatnot, even though they're going through an emotional wave, and that's not exactly how they feel. Not just because they're being sociable and everything with other people does not exactly mean that they're okay. They may be going through a lot of emotional crap and they're not necessarily aware of it. Like I said, Pisces get swept up in their emotions. They're not exactly concrete aware of their emotions. This also ties into the fact that because it's mutable water, their emotions aren't necessarily the most clear of emotions compared to other moon signs and whatnot. For example, Pisces moons in general tend to be they tend to go through emotions in waves. As I said, their emotions they have a hard time identifying their own emotions because they're just so complex and interconnected that it's hard for them to separate one from the other. They can identify simple emotions like sadness and anger and frustration and whatnot, but Pisces moons, because for one, ruled by Neptune and Jupiter, and as you know, Neptune is the kind of abstract ideology and spirituality and the delusion, all of that stuff. And so mix that with the fact that it's a mutable water sign, and we have a sign that their emotions and their own feelings are blend in with each other, and so it can be hard for them. They kind of just get caught up on this wave of emotions that are being blended in with each other and everything. So for example, they could be feeling sadness and anger and happiness at the same time, and may not exactly know how to separate these one from another because they're all mixed in, and they're feeling different emotions from certain scenarios that they've experienced in their life that they might be thinking about, and this emotional energy that they're receiving from it is all being mixed in together, and they're kind of just riding the wave along with those sort of emotions. I feel that's how Pisces moon kind of operates. they go through their emotional waves and whatnot, and it's not exactly clear to them what's going on because all their emotions are kind of like mixed together and everything, but they are very emotional, they are very emotionally sensitive, and this kind of like contributes to why they're going through their emotions all the time. Now, because their emotions aren't necessarily clear to them doesn't mean that they're not capable of like expressing them. I know that Pisces moons can be very, very capable of like emotional intelligence and depth because Pisces, perhaps being one of the most sensitive signs of the zodiac, is very sensitive to their environment and their surroundings. And I don't mean sensitive as in like being easily hurt, which is possible with Pisces moons, very, very possible because it is a water sign moon, but also like emotion, like reacted to their environment and everything. As I've said before, water is very emotionally reactive and reflective. That's what's going on with Pisces moons. Now, because of this, Pisces moons tend to, because they're very emotionally like reactive and reflective and everything, they can be prone to taking on this sort of like emotional energy of their surroundings, and based on how they feel about it, it affects them greatly. And so this can be reflected in how they deal with things. For example, I knew a Pisces moon friend. We would go to gym class and he hated it so much that like that amount of negativity that he invested in hating it literally turned him, like it shut him down. And I don't mean like, it's not like water sign moodiness where he was just like real bitchy or like was like snappy and getting angry over dumb things and everything. It was like the kind where like he would just like become a walking zombie. Like he was like if he didn't like a certain place, you would like know right off the bat, not because he would make it clear. Like he'd make it clear, but it was indirectly, like indirectly or unintentionally, because he would just shut down. Like he'd become a walking zombie. He would like you try to have a normal human conversation with him, he didn't respond because the environment was infecting him so much that he didn't like it. It made it hard, like to like normally like socialize with him and everything. He wouldn't talk to you, he wouldn't react to anything, he'd just be like emotionally shut down. He'd like go through and like it'd be like a walking robot, completely soulless, like his soul left his body and everything. And if Pisces moons are in very negative environments, I feel like this is kind of like a coping mechanism that they can kind of employ in order to get through situations that they are really emotionally affected by, that they really don't like. However, it's like I said, because they're affected by their environment, it wasn't the case when he had like hung around real close friends and stuff. He like was very open, he was very sociable, he always like wanted to talk with friends and everything. He like opened up a lot more about like his feelings and stuff. If there was one thing that I would know that like concerned me about the Pisces moon thing, is that he wasn't necessarily like very open about his emotions. Sometimes like if he was going through like an emotional mood, we tend to be very closed off about it. But aside from that, like I said, they're very affected by their environment. This kind of is reflected on how they deal with their emotions. If they're in a negative environment, they're going to take that energy in, and it's going to affect them on an emotional level and can make them very, very unhappy. So like I feel like Pisces moons kind of need to be careful of who they're involved with, because I know Pisces moons can be very, very selfless and compassionate and forgiving. And of course, this is on an evolved level. If we're going to talk about the unevolved level, that's very different. But before we get into that, the very like forgiving, compassionate, very selfless side of them can sometimes get them unwillingly involved with very negative people that are bad for them. And Pisces can have this habit of always wanting to see the good side in people and always wanting to believe in the best in people and everything. And so this can kind of get them unintentionally burned, because they always want to believe that there's always a good thing to people, and people that like emotional like manipulators and abusers and all of that can see that, and they take advantage of that because they know that these people are just going to be like so giving and so caring for them that they just kind of just get like smacked in the face, because people that really don't care about them see that, take advantage of them, and use them and leave them for dead. And so this can kind of like mess with Pisces moons and make them kind of like stuck between the evolved and unevolved side. Because like I said, we have to remember that Pisces moons are mutable water. And so this mutable water kind of affects how they view evolved and unevolved situations. Like an unevolved Pisces moon can be the type of person who plays the victim constantly. They can actually be emotional manipulators in contrast to being emotionally manipulated by everyone else, because they feel like that people need to like play up to their emotions. They constantly like are completely ignorant and oblivious to like the emotional needs of other people and constantly emotionally neglect everyone else around them, but at the same time constantly play the emotional victim game and feel like people need to constantly make sure that they're emotionally okay and constantly like play up on their emotions and stuff. It's a form of emotional manipulation that Pisces can do, and because of their mutable water nature and the fact that they're ruled by Neptune in modern astrology, they can actually be very emotionally delusional in this case, and that can actually make the unevolved state for Pisces much worse because they think that they're doing the right thing and they're not. And this is a bad cycle. So I feel like Pisces moons can be a complete mess sometimes, and I really have to like identify on the fact that they can be very emotionally neglectful in the unevolved state because they're so swept up in their emotions, they kind of just get lost in them and run with them. Sometimes Pisces moons can be very capable of just like blacking out and just doing some of the most crazy, insane shit ever, because they kind of just like get swept up in their emotions and they don't really have any control of them. It's different from Scorpio moon, and I compare this to Scorpio moon because Scorpio moon also goes through very, very intense emotional waves like Pisces does, but Scorpio is extremely aware of everything that's going on. That's what makes Scorpio moon strive so much for emotional control, because they know exactly what's happening. Pisces moons don't. Pisces moons don't really have that ability because they just get so completely absorbed in their emotional nature that they just kind of like fly off the handle and just completely swallowed up in their feelings, and they just don't really like know exactly how to keep it under control because they're absorbed in their feelings. They're not really aware of everything that's happening outside of them, so they kind of just like I said, do some crazy things. And so I feel like Pisces moons kind of need to like be careful of that stuff because, like I said, because of the fact they're mutable water, they can get swallowed up, lose their shit, do some crazy stuff, blackout, as I said. And so with Pisces moons, basically to sum up moon in Pisces, they can be very emotional, be sensitive to their environment. They get easily affected by the people that they're with and around. They can be very capable of emotionally empathetic abilities and feeling other people out and stuff. And they can be very, very understanding, giving to other people. But at the same time, this can also grow into resentment if they're constantly being treated by shit and everything by people constantly over and over and over again, because they're so giving and they're so always wanting to see the good sides of people. They can be victims of abuse because they tend to sometimes on an unevolved level delude themselves into believing the other person is good for them when they're not, and get swept up in that. They kind of sometimes have a hard time like seeing through like their emotions and stuff because they easily get swept into them. Their emotions kind of blend into each other. They're not necessarily very concrete emotions, so they kind of like are a mixed bag of emotions. It's like a swirl of emotions, and so they're trying to like sort of I don't want to say sort through, because Pisces doesn't really sort through their emotions. Like, it just flow through them. They like feel them out and they just like roll with it and they get absorbed in it, and that's what they're doing because that's mutable water. They adapt, they become what it is, and that's how they go through things. They enter a room with a bunch of different people, they become the other people. They they suddenly feel a bunch of sadness, they become the sadness. I know this sounds really a really like strange, weird way of describing it, but I really want to identify on the fact that Pisces is mutable water. That's like mutable water fact of Pisces is the most understanding bit about Pisces moons that you will get. And that is Moon in Pisces. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this video made a lot of sense for you. And if it did, I'm glad. If you like this video, like it and stuff. That's great if you did. If you want to see more moon sign videos and stuff, check out my YouTube channel and whatnot. And I'll talk to you later. So thank you for watching.